So the other day we got the Season 2 announcement, and with it, info that a Luna rework would happen. However, if you think about it, a Luna rework is incredibly unlikely to change how her buffs work in terms of their bonuses, and is far more likely to change instead the ease of access when it comes to how you obtain them. Because in my opinion, Luna is already the strongest fucking Descendant in the game with all her buffs. But holy fuck, she is the worst to play when it comes to how you get them. Given that, and the fact that I was already working on a video for her, I think it will be fairly safe to discuss how Luna team builds work on a fundamental level, because even if the end goal changes for her after the rework in terms of team builds, I would bet money it's not going to change by much. In addition, I'm pretty sure that nobody actually knows how to accurately calculate her buffs as she is now, and there's one particular aspect to a buff I'm not sure anyone has noticed yet. So to start, we are going to talk about how each of her abilities work at base, and then how they work with the Transcendent mod Aggressive Melody, which converts her skill-based team buffs to firearm-based bonuses instead. Luna's first ability is called Stage Presence, and it lets her pull out a unique weapon, which is the core of her ability mechanics, as this starts her DDR or rhythm mode, and it fucking sucks. The TLDR for this is when in this state, you're presented with a Guitar Hero-esque note game, where if you shoot as a note passes, then you get a skill power modifier bonus for your unique weapon, which, while it can be cool, is largely pointless. The more important part here is that if you try to cast a skill as a note passes, then the skill will succeed and also give you a stack on your custom resource bar so that you can work towards casting an enhanced skill later. But if you fail to hit the note when you cast a skill, then your skill will fail, giving you no bonuses, and it will instead go straight into cooldown, completely wasting the cast. Don't get me wrong, it's not hard to hit notes, but this game actively trains you to be brain dead, so needing to monitor your Guitar Hero state while also making sure you're working towards the right enhanced skill while also paying attention to the fight is all just kind of shit, no? Anyways, I'll cut that rant short because this ability represents why she is painful to play, but everything hereafter represents why she's fucking nuts. Because Luna's second ability is called Exciting Act and will be referred to as Red whenever we talk about it again later. And it, along with all her other buffs, have a regular buff for herself, and then a regular buff for her team, and then an enhanced version of the buff for herself, and then an enhanced version of the buff for her team. The distinction is important here because her personal buff, whether enhanced or not, will never apply to the team, and the team buff that she gives will never apply to her. When it comes to the personal buff, at base she gets a 20% bonus to skill power modifiers, and then when it is enhanced, she gets a 64.7% bonus instead. On the team buff, it takes a percent of your maximum MP as Luna, and then it converts it to a base power ratio bonus. So the regular buff says it takes 3.5% of your MP, which is a lie, by the way, because it actually takes 3.52%. So let's say that you have 637.55 max MP, and the two decimals here do matter. That means we will take 637.55 times it by 0.0352, which equals 22.44176. We know that power ratios, even if they display as a percent value, are really just decimals though. We're going to divide that by 100, which gives us the 0.2244176. And if you watched my recent video on how defense gets calculated, this buff actually follows the same limitations. So for those who really want to get technical, we will add 0.00001, and then afterwards we will truncate the decimals, cutting off anything after the fourth. So we will get 0.2244 instead of 0.2244176. So a 22.44% bonus to the base power skill ratio. This might seem pointless to discuss, but this is how the buffs are calculated on the outgoing bonuses for any parts of her buffs that use MP conversion to get their number. The enhanced version of the team buff just changes this conversion from 3.52% all the way up to 7.53%, though again, the game will lie and say it's 7.5%, just ignore it. On top of that, unlike the regular team buff, the enhanced buff will also give a skill crit rate bonus and a skill crit damage bonus. The crit rate bonus applies to the base of the character rate before mods come into play. So say you're playing and buffing a Freyna. Freyna has a base rate of 5%, but the team buff will give her a base bonus of 35%. So 35 plus 5, Freyna now has a base crit rate before mods of 40%. And we all know that the 4 mods can give you about a 200% increase, which means suddenly Freyna can go from one of the worst crit descendants imaginable to being able to reach 100% crit rate before crit resistances, which means Freyna can be just as effective as Haley or Lepic in cases like these, if not better, while also building for crit. And that's something we'll talk about later in the video, but for now, just take it to mean that Luna can take pretty much any character and make them ridiculously fucking strong. Characters that should normally never build crit suddenly do like fucking 2 to 3 times more damage while building for crit, but only if you have Luna. The skill crit damage buff she gives here just acts like a regular crit damage mod. It's not to the base multiplier or anything like that. And also a quick note on the personal buff, it will say that on the enhanced version you're getting a 65% bonus to skill power modifier for Luna herself. That's a lie. It doesn't matter if you are using Transcendent mods, they're all going to say different stuff. Some will say 65, 64.8. It's all 64.7. Get used to not trusting the UI on anything related to Luna. This ability is also modified by the Aggressive Melody Transcendent mod, but we will talk about that after all the other abilities have been discussed. In summary though, before moving on to the next skill, when enhanced, this ability can provide your team up to a 61.48 base power ratio bonus. And for reference, that is as large as a maxed out power increase mod, or as large as the Slayer set bonus added together with the Dangerous Ambush Immobile bonus, while also giving your team a 35% bonus to base skill crit rate and giving 50% more skill crit damage. Holy fuck. Luna's third ability is called Relaxing Act, and is referred to as blue. And while it isn't terribly insane, it's actually still very helpful for speed kill teams that use like Lepic or other characters that have a continuous MP cost. For the personal buff, it just gives Luna an MP refund, and when enhanced, it just gives her back even more MP. Not a huge deal, but for the team buff, it gives people constant MP regen every second, regardless of their combat state, which is pretty important. And when enhanced, it can give even more MP regen per second, but it doesn't even have to be enhanced. And that's part of why this is so crazy for a team with Lepics in particular, because if you watched my latest Lepic video, you already understand the MP constraints and how they work for his ability in relation to duration. But if Luna were able to drop even a regular blue buff before casting an enhanced red, Lepic already doesn't need to build into cost. As long as the Lepics have good max MP rolls on their sensors, they're set, and will be able to get all 17-18 shots without having to worry. Assuming they aren't knocked down, of course. Again, the blue buff here isn't all that crazy compared to red, but it's still really helpful depending on what your team composition is, so please do not ignore it. Luna's fourth ability is called Cheerful Act, and is referred to as purple. For the personal buff, it makes it so landing note hits against enemies with the gun will give you inspiration gauge stacks without needing to land notes with skill casts, which means you'll be able to get your bar to max much faster in order to be able to cast an enhanced skill again. On regular, it makes it so enemy hits that are also note hits will give you 1 stack per hit, but enhanced will give you 2 stacks per hit. On the team buff though, on regular it gives your allies 10% cooldown reduction, but on enhanced it gives you 40.9% cooldown reduction, but it also resets any and all active cooldowns your team had when they received the buff. A kind of tricky but cool part of this that I'm not sure anyone knows yet, because a lot of people believe that you can only get 1 cooldown reset from this on the team buff, but you can actually reset more than once. And in order to explain this though, let's talk about how her auras work first. On any buff, not just purple, and regardless of whether it was enhanced or not, Luna's buff AoE lasts for 14.5 seconds, and this duration cannot be modified. When an ally stands inside the AoE, they get the buff on themselves, and the buff they receive lasts for a minimum of 5 seconds, and that duration can be modified by Luna's duration. With that in mind, if allies stay inside the ring for the full 14.5 seconds, that means the buff will keep refreshing, but the moment the AoE ring expires, then the buff will remain on characters that received it for the base 5 seconds or longer, right? But what happens when someone is inside the ring when it is cast, but leaves and comes back inside later? If someone is inside the ring, they'll get the buff, but say they leave immediately, then the buff they got from the ring will expire after 5 seconds. But that doesn't mean they can't get the buff again, so if they enter the ring, they'll get the buff again for another 5 seconds that is continually refreshed until they either leave or the ring expires. The reason that people currently believe that the reset can only happen once is because people after getting the reset are still standing inside, getting the buff continually reset and refreshed over and over and over. The reset will only happen when the buff is first applied. So for those who haven't put 2 and 2 together yet, say you are Haley and you cast your big fuck off laser. Then Luna casts an enhanced purple. Hooray, your cooldown is reset. Now you leave the ring immediately and cast your big fuck off laser again, and before entering the ring again, you wait for 5 seconds for the buff to expire. Now you go inside the ring again, and because you have no buff, the game is applying the buff again for the quote-unquote first time, and resets your cooldown again. So now you leave the ring again and cast your big fucking laser, and by the time the buff expires again, about 10 to 11 seconds will have passed, because the AoE rings last for 14.5 seconds. This means that once again, you can go inside the ring for one last time and get your cooldowns completely reset. The takeaway here is that in almost every imaginable scenario, it is best to build Luna for duration to make the buffs last as long as you possibly can once the AoE ring expires, but in some cases, given what I just discussed, you might want to have 0 duration on Luna, because if you reset every 5 seconds and have a duration of 14.5 on the ring, that means at a maximum you will be able to reset a skill's cooldown 3 different times within that 14.5 second window, because you'll have the first reset when the AoE starts, and then you'll have 2 more resets with the 5-second gaps in between. It would have to be a really weird team composition that could get the most benefit from coordinating your team to work with the cooldowns like that, but it could definitely be helpful depending on the kind of bosses we see going forward. Lastly, Luna's passive just explains how the inspiration gauge works in relation to building her bar in order to cast an enhanced skill, but we've already talked about that, so we'll just move on. And with all her base abilities done, let's talk about aggressive melody, because that one is kind of insane. If we circle back to red, it makes it so instead of base power ratio, it just gives a firearm attack percent bonus. And again, the MP conversion for this is fucking lying to you. It says it's a 3.7% bonus, it is actually a 3.65% bonus, and it is calculated the exact same way the power ratio is when we discussed that earlier. When enhanced, the game claims the conversion rate is boosted up to 3.9%, but we know better than to believe their lies at this point. The actual conversion rate is 3.86%. On top of that, it gives a base crit rate bonus to firearms of 7.8%, the same way the skill base bonus works. So it's added to the base crit rate before mods are factored, but unlike skill bonuses in the regular skill, aggressive melody makes it so you gain a 36% bonus to the base critical hit damage multiplier of your weapon. So a better way to think about this is that if your weapon has a 2x crit multi, then it adds 0.36 to the multi before crit damage comes into play, leaving you with 2.36 times that is then multiplied against the sum of your mods. There are very few things in the game that can actually add to the base of a damage multiplier, and this is one of them. Another like it though, and this is the next thing that we're going to talk about, is purple, because aggressive melody makes it so purple no longer gives cooldown reduction or resets cooldowns, but instead it gives you a weak point damage bonus of 7.6% on a regular cast and 24.2% on an enhanced cast. What makes this fucking crazy is the weak point damage is a bonus to base, just like we discussed on crit damage. It is not a percent bonus like your weak point damage mods are. It adds to the base multiplier before mods come into play. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only thing in the entire game that adds to weak point multipliers before mods do. But that's really all aggressive melody does. It just changes red and purple to be weapon-specific team bonuses instead of skill-based. But you should be able to understand why those bonuses can be so valuable if we're talking about aggressive melody, whether we're talking about aggressive melody or not. But what if you don't get it? What if you're still confused on just how large a damage increase this lady is? Let's talk about Lepic, Freyna, and Kyle, because those are the characters that you're typically seeing when people run in speed kills for Deathstalker, and there's a lot more people out there than I would have thought who don't actually get why those team compositions are fucking Stalker into the ground. The regular Lepic build, as we know it, against Deathstalker would do 23.8 million damage per cast on average, which is a far cry from what he normally does on the solo bosses. Granted, we're just going to change the build anyways because Luna changes the math, but even if we just add an enhanced red Luna to our Lepic as it is now, that changes our damage against Deathstalker from 23.8 million all the fucking way up to 45.9 million. And that's not even the highest the Luna buff can go, because these numbers are operating under the assumption that Luna has no arcade concretion stacks, which we will talk about later. So already, we're basically doubling the damage, and that's on one person. A Luna buffing 3 Lepics in her team like this is now the rough equivalent of 1 Luna and 6 Lepics. So if you ever see people try to argue against Luna by saying you're better served by having another DPS in her place, holy shit, no you are not. Luna is outrageous, and it doesn't even have to be Lepic. Regarding Lepic real quick, he's overcapped on crit rate, and you're better served ditching skill insight and replacing it with iron defense. And I do mean iron defense, not spear and shield. Iron defense is a greater damage gain here, and that brings us up to 46.8 million per cast, assuming a 65% ambush immobile uptime, and I'll use that metric for every comparison that we do here. Now let's look at Freyna. If we take the critless mods as we know it, on a single baptism cast against Deathstalker, we'll do 22.9 million, which for critless is honestly not that bad, and it's still competitive with Lepic. If we add a Luna enhanced red buff to her, it's still going to help bring her up to 29.5 million, and that's still huge, but the problem is you should never run critless mods odds when you're running with a Luna. Because now let's look at crit Freyna with Deathstalker. Because crit Freyna achieves a 20.8 million average against Deathstalker, which is, yes, less than critless. On pretty much any boss, critless with no buffs is always going to beat out crit Freyna. But once the Luna buff pops in with another enhanced red, that brings us all the way up to 46.1 million damage, which is a little more than double of what we could achieve on critless only. And you'll notice that the 46.1 million is actually competitive with what Lepic gets at 46.8 million. But not only is she competitive, but she does her damage significantly faster. Lepic only achieves the amount of damage that he does over the full 17 shots and easily what ends up being over 20 seconds of damage, whereas Freyna can achieve all of that same damage within 10 seconds, which is way better DPS. When it comes to speed kills, between Freyna and Lepic, the winner is Freyna. Regarding Freyna's crit build with Luna though, you'd run what you see on screen, and you'll notice that instead of running front lines for more crit rate and crit damage, we actually run Toxic Intensive, and that is a much better damage gain here. Kyle is actually a very special case, because normally, even with Luna's crit buffs from her red, you still don't actually want to run Kyle as crit, at least if you're doing the Missile Man build. However, as some of you may have seen, Kyle holds the world record for the fastest Deathstalker kill at just 5 seconds. And while that is something cool that we can accomplish, you need to understand that the people achieving it are gambling on all 3 Kyles getting a crit after each of them hit just one single time. And if they don't crit, they have to reset and try again. It's a fun route to go with friends if you're trying to get world records, but the odds of 3 Kyles all critting in a row with just 1 hit each, at a maximum of a 30% crit rate, as we all know Deathstalker has a 70% skill crit resist, is something like 3%. And that's fucking cancer. I offer a Kyle build on screen for those who want to pursue shit like that, but I have to say, guys, it's not fucking realistic. It's not a real build, it's a gimmick for speed kills, and it's not even a reliable one. If you want to have a reliable speed kill, then just get Luna and 3 crit Freynas, and you will have the best time doing it that way. Now, finally though, for the Luna build. Given that the base power ratio bonus scales with your max MP, we want the highest possible max MP roll on our sensor, which would be 159. Then we use Enlightenment, HP conversions, MP variant, MP accelerant, and then even Archaic Concretion to boost our maximum MP up to a ceiling of 816.56. If you have no concretion stacks, then your max MP would instead be 637.55. On top of having the strongest buff possible, we also want them to last a long time, so we bring skill extension and then MP accelerant from before, and then you'd want duration on one of your reactor substats, and then we also have a little bit more duration from the 2-piece annihilation set, bringing our total buff duration to 8.665 seconds. But that's only after the AoE expires, and you'll recall that the AoE is a fixed 14.5 seconds, so 14.5 plus 8.66 is 23.16 seconds, in which your allies will have the buff assuming they stayed in the ring the whole time while the 14.5 seconds was up. You can throw in maximized duration instead of MP accelerant, but that's kind of a waste though, since you'll gain another second, sure, but what really is the difference between 23 and 24 seconds on the buff? Nobody, not even Lepic, needs that long to deal all of his damage. MP accelerant will still give you plenty of duration, while also giving you a hair more MP to work with. With the mods we've addressed so far though, we've achieved the 2 primary goals for Luna, which is having the strongest buff we can, while also making it last as long as we can. So the rest is kind of flex, but you do want Luna to be tanky as hell, because unlike say Lepic, if Lepic gets knocked down, he could die or lose a third of his damage while getting back up. But if you as the Luna are knocked down, then nothing is lost, because your AoE will last as long as its duration is up, or as long as you're alive. So as Luna, you want to be in the way, taking aggro for your teammates. To help with that though, we stack HP and DR. So we bring HP amplification, increased HP, sensory deprivations HP variant, which gives us flat DR, and then we're rolling with the immunity mod for Toxin, which is called Perfect Antivenom, as well as the flat resist mod for it as well, which is called Toxic Antibody. All Colossi seemingly have a mixture of damage in every attack that we will talk about in another video soon actually. But with that in mind, you need high defense in order to deal with the physical damage, and then you need, on Deathstalker in particular, higher toxin resistance and toxin immunity, which is why we take these so we never get stuck with a poison status effect that would kill us over time, and then we also take less damage from the toxin attribute attacks, which is almost all that Deathstalker has. But given that you're not always fighting Deathstalker, you obviously want to swap out the base resistance mod and the immunity mod to fit whatever element boss you're fighting. Lastly, you can of course pop on aggressive melody whenever you want to buff guns instead of skills, and even with a Transcendent mod in play, you can get away with doing this kind of build and leaving 2 slots uncatalyzed, which is a nice change of pace, honestly. I'm kind of getting tired of needing to invest 12 plus into a character. Your Reactor is largely irrelevant. You do not need to match match attributes or types. All you really care about is getting a maximum duration substat, and then the other stat can be anything else you want that is usable. Range, cooldown, cost, etc. Components, you need a 2-piece Annihilation set for the duration bonus, and then you can either finish off and just use 4-piece Annihilation, or you can do a 2-piece Invader set to go with it, which is the set that you get from Deathstalker, and that'll give you more HP from the base stats that are locked into that set, and then more shield from the 2-piece effect. Someone is probably going to try and argue that Bravery is also an okay choice here. It's not. Sure, you'll get 1% more duration, and you'll still get a shield benefit, sure, but you're throwing away all of your max HP stats that are locked into the Annihilation set or the Invader set. Do not run Bravery. And then I think that's it, guys. I definitely glossed over her general gameplay in regards to bar building leading up to her enhanced buff, shit like that, but I also don't really care because, like I said at the start of the video, she is in for a rework. And given how strong her buffs are, as we just showed, literally doubling if not tripling the damage on some characters, you know the rework isn't going to be touching the buffs. All it's going to do is dumb down how her minigame works, or it'll remove it flat out and give us something much simpler, so there's no point in discussing it right now. Also, if you think Noise Surge is a viable build, you're a fucking poser.